coaching and power skills development. I'm Dani Johnson. I'm from Red Thread Research. We do a lot of research in the area of learning and skills and career. And one of the things that keeps on popping up in some of the discussions that we've been having lately is this idea of coaching and its importance. And I think that that conversation has only intensified since COVID hit us all. We know that according to the Institute of Coaching, over 70% of individuals who get the coaching benefit from it and have improved work performance. And we also know that about 86% of companies that actually invest in coaching feel like the investment was really worth it. So today we have 5 panelists with us, 5 experts in the field. And I want to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. I've chosen scenes from San Diego where I think we all wish we were. So we'll start with Matti Niebelschuetz.
Thanks a lot. Very nice to be with you. Indeed, wonderful background here. Also like the dolphins a lot. So my name is Matti. I'm a founder and CEO of Coach Hub, a leading platform for digital coaching. Yeah, in the coaching space since several years now. As background, serial entrepreneurs for more than 10 years, and also being coached for more than 6 years myself as a coachee. So very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Matti. Our next panelist is Frye, and I'm not sure if Neil has made it on yet. He's connecting, so we'll come back to him. Christine Tao from Sounding Board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tao. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Sounding Board. I'm coming to you today from the Bay Area, where I have actually lost my power. So forgive the all natural background you see. At Sounding Board, our mission is to democratize executive coaching. We have a cloud-based coaching platform that allows us to manage and deliver coaching across an organization at all levels.
Thank you very much, Christine. We're going to jump back to Neil really quickly. I can see him online now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again. Thanks. So sorry for being late. Neil Frye here. I'm the Chief People Officer at Alto Pharmacy. Been here since about November. I certainly am excited to share a bit about coaching as we're trying to implement it here in the new normal.
If there is such thing, yes.
Right.
Joseph.
Sure. Hi, I'm Joe, co-founder and CEO at Cultivate. We are an AI coaching platform that aims to strengthen workplace relationships, and we do that by giving people feedback and analyzing their own digital communication data. So the digital relationships they have at work around email and chat, and improving their self-awareness in relationship with their peers. And I'm really excited to talk to everyone about coaching today. So thanks for having me.
Very good. And then finally, Will.
Hi, my name is Will Houghteling. I'm joining from San Francisco. I'm the founder and CEO of Strive. We are a management training and leadership development platform that uses technology and social accountability to help people apply the lessons they learn in the real world to actually develop types of leadership skills we all need to see in our leaders. I started Strive after spending my career in ed tech at Google and YouTube for a number of years, and then at a startup called Minerva, building a university from scratch. So I've been in this category for a while.
Very good. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit sharing screens. We can stop looking for just a second at San Diego, because I want everybody to be able to see everybody's face. We have sort of structured this discussion around 5 major questions that we came up with together. And I want to start with one that is sort of overarching. And this is, I think we'll start with Christine on this. Christine, super interested in what you think about the different types of coaching that are coming up. So it used to just be management coaching, but now we're seeing a whole bunch of other ones. What are those kinds of coaching coming up, and do you have an opinion on their effectiveness?
Yeah, I think, if you really think about what coaching is, it's an approach to development. And that approach, just like a fitness regimen or anything, can be applied in many different ways for different outcomes. So whether you're talking about career coaching, leadership coaching, maybe it's health and wellness, there's different forms and outcomes that the coaching is trying to drive. The other thing I think that's, part of why we're all here today is the medium of that. You know, coaching really started out as something that was really an in-person, high-touch type of a model. But what technology has really enabled a lot of us to do is to bring that approach to folks in many different ways. So, you know, you've got Joe, who's got Cultivate, who's really looking at analyzing data and providing sort of digital nudges, whereas you have folks like ourselves that are actually connecting you with a human coach on the other side to provide that development. And so that's what I actually find is really interesting and exciting. You know, coaching is really powerful because the goal of it is not necessarily just rote practice of skills, but it's about trying to get to those underlying mindsets and insights that are driving your habits and your behaviors. So being able to use that and have that distributed in different formats, I think, is what's really powerful about the time we're in today.
Thank you so much. Other panelists have something to add?
Yeah, I'll certainly share, you know, as a practitioner who's helping leaders at a company that's about, 700 or 800 folks. Again, I'd echo what was just said in terms of fundamentally that's changed since, you know, my early days at Accenture and Google, where traditional coaching models were in play. I, again, am now blending a program together that includes mental health, wellness, performance management, and coaches really are coming online and being more digitally available and targeting those plans, not only on the competencies that we know we want leaders to build, but ensuring that they bring themselves best selves to work each day.
I really like that, Neil. We've been hearing of some that we haven't heard of before, like a financial coach and a sleep coach, and all of these things that really affect the wellness of the individual and their ability to perform. Any other comments on this question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that what's also really interesting is not just that you have different forms of coaching, but they actually complement each other, right? So you have new coachings and they start to blend. So it's not just, oh, I've got a human coach and I've got a data coach, but now the human coach can use the data from the digital coach, and now it makes it better, right? And so you've got wellness coaching, but that also might tie into your career progress coaching and your life coaching. And so it's a fascinating time because they sort of accelerate each other, right? It's not an either or, I have to only pick one sort of coach. And that, I think, has let the market sort of explode in a way that I think is quite fascinating and all helpful for the person who's trying to get that coaching.
So I think that's a really interesting point too. And a few of you have mentioned that this is an interesting time for coaching. I think it's been I think we've seen an acceleration over the last 6 months. It was an important conversation before then, but it's even accelerated in the last 6 months. We've seen coaching become less of a C-suite thing. It used to be just for executives. It seems to be being pushed down through middle management and sometimes even individual contributors. What do you think is driving this trend? And we'll start with Matti on this one.
Yeah, that's actually a great trend that we're seeing. And to be honest, even though we're seeing it's accelerating since a few months now, we're still at day one. So we all cannot imagine how digital coaching will look like in 10 years. Because coming from a world where coaching was mainly accessible for the C-suite, and now approaching more a level where it's accessible to middle management and also individual contributors. So my view on this is that there are basically two drivers for this. And basically one driver is the company side and the other driver is the talent side. And if you look at the company side, we all see these days, change is everywhere. And it's not only COVID that is forcing huge change on all of us, but it's actually the digital transformation that is a major change for pretty much any larger organization anyways. And change, as always, is performed by human beings. And you cannot put maybe traditional formats and top-down communication for people to live change, because if you want to have behavioral change happen, it needs to be highly specific, highly individual, and you need to repeat it over and over again. And that's exactly what coaching can do. And then the other driver, it's the talent side. If you ask new talents joining the labor market these days, it's not so much about, okay, who earns the biggest paycheck, who drives the fastest car, but it's actually about personal development. It's about growth. It's about purpose at work. And all of this can be really nurtured with your own coach. So fully see this trend. And at the same time, we're still at day one.
What about others?
Well, I think, I think you have to recognize that technology is a huge driver, right? So most of us are sitting here because we might be offering something that's being powered digitally, virtually, or in different mediums. And that's really brought the price point down and accessibility of coaching so that it went from something that was for the C-suite that now can actually be adopted for newer managers, because you're getting really close to the price of sending them off to a training, right? Or other things that where now you might be able to see much deeper impact of that because of that continuous sort of always on development.
Yeah. I was just going to throw in there too quickly that again, this idea and concept around coaching and certainly simulations have taken on a whole new look with VR and AR. At Dropbox during my time there, we brought in external actors to try to make those simulations for our leaders more real. And what's going to be more real than VR, right? And repeatable and scalable in a way that model wasn't. And again, the particular content for a lot of that coaching was focused in an area that adds onto what Matti shared, which is this event around the uprising and systemic racism, right? So we're starting to see these vendors emerge that I'm excited to start to partner with on applying virtual reality to diversity discussions, where as a cis white man, I can sit inside of a virtual reality and potentially see what it feels like to be someone of a different race or of a different gender, and really feel, what mansplaining or what microaggressions can feel like.
Thank you, Neil. I know Will has been trying to speak for a bit. Will.
Oh, yeah. I think the topic of democratization of coaching is an interesting one, and I wonder the extent to which there's like a narrative that matches the reality. So I feel like what's happened with coaching, when I say coaching, there's human coaching and there's digital coaching. I think digital coaching, the type that Joe is doing, absolutely has moved down to the masses because it's obviously free, zero marginal cost to deliver. I think that the democratization of executive coaching has moved from the C-suite to the VP to the director. But I'm actually very curious to hear from Neil, like, are you at Alto Pharmacy, were you at Dropbox providing human coaches for your ICs, for your managers? Were you doing that en masse? Was that more of like for individual high pose or kind of, people on PIPs, et cetera? Because I feel like the technology has created a marketplace, but absent the solutions that Joe has created, I think it actually really hasn't cut the cost dramatically, except for some kind of like slight geo arbitrage where you get coaches in third tier markets teaching employees in first tier markets.
Sure.
So I'm curious, Neil, like how you think about that for first line managers and for ICs.
Yeah, so we definitely brought the human coach down to the kind of senior manager level at Dropbox. We're starting to just begin that work here at Alto. What I'd say is that at the individual manager level, it continues to be most likely an internal coaching relationship, so i.e. mentorship. I'd love to definitely continue to both leverage digital and some live/virtual coaching. The thing again to throw out to the group is really around quality. How do we get better reads on quality? Now there's this flood of coaches, particularly given COVID, that are offering services on these platforms, everything from freelance to again more subscription-based coaching platforms. How do we get to a language around quality so that as I'm reviewing, I understand what strengths and weaknesses are? Because I think that'll be important as I select one of those platforms.
Yeah, and that's a highly subjective thing.
Yeah, maybe quickly jumping in here. So because this is actually a great point and the quality, and I'm not sure if I fully agree with what I've previously heard on cutting cost and reducing the spend, because I think that's not the purpose. I think the key pain point that most of our clients actually have is making coaching scalable scalable in quality across the globe and making it measurable, because then you're really looking at the value. And I think that's much better to actually look at the output and not so much looking at the cost for it. So I think that this is really the big driver behind it.
I think that's definitely ideal. I haven't talked to an L&D or a talent department that isn't worried about their budget. So I definitely think it does come into play, but I think you have a good point, Matti. Let's talk a little bit about some of the trends or innovations that we've seen. About 2 years ago, it was mostly just traditional coaching, and those platforms that we saw, those tech platforms that we saw, were to help match people up. In the last 6 months, I've talked to or recognized about 100 vendors that are playing in this space now. So there are lots of people that are really interested in coaching in some way. And I'd love to understand some of the innovations you're seeing or even offering. And Neil, we're going to start with you.
Oh gosh, I may have done this ahead of time. I may have gotten ahead of myself. But the main innovation I think I'm loving seeing is certainly some of the VR and AR, as I mentioned, particularly in the diversity space. And then the second is certainly, again, this mass of coaches that are now coming online, as it were, in a platform that allows me to potentially pick and choose much easier than before, right? Before I had to go out into the marketplace and pick this coaching partner and this coaching partner, and maybe I picked one for the C-suite and another one for the director and below population. Maybe I snagged a university program for coaching and tacked that on. It was definitely now coming to potentially an opportunity where that more holistic purchase, so to speak, can happen is one of the innovations that I'm seeing emerge that I'm excited about.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
One of the really interesting things that we've seen as we've started to look at research is the way that data plays into this. And Joe, I've seen Joe's tool, and I've seen data even on some of the more traditional tools. And so I'm wondering how you're using data within your organization to not just make those decisions, but make better decisions for your people. Yeah, so certainly early stages. Again, at 800 people, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we have a leadership development program already and some coaches happening. But certainly the first thing what we're measuring is leadership competencies. So we developed and aligned on those. We're measuring those every 6 months with our leaders. We're assessing the coaches that are on board. We're asking kind of this standard set of questions. I think ultimately, as I look back on my experience at Dropbox and at Google, certainly much more data, much more sophisticated. Ultimately it came down to a matter of both their performance, internal mobility, and internal engagement. Those were the things that we looked at for measuring the value of and the impact of coaching. Individuals were happier. We had lower attrition rates. We had greater internal mobility, movement, and we saw overall leaders being recognized as really talent multipliers, to use Liz Wiseman's words. People who weren't scared of trading talent or losing talent because they knew there was this cycle of talent kind of flowing through their team. I dig it. What have other of you seen as far as innovations go?
I'll jump in. I think what is interesting that we've heard from a lot of our customers is the idea of non-programmatic, right? Being ways to coach in a non-programmatic way. So, traditionally you send someone to a boot camp, or they go through a session, or they go to a conference, or even if I'm scheduling time with a coach, I have to set a calendar time to meet with that coach, right? Or do the VR training, right? And so a lot of coaching has traditionally been in a programmatic way. And I think what's hard right now is everyone's on this stage of being burnt out all the time, right? Our calendars are super busy. We have back-to-back Zoom meetings. And so how can we push coaching out to people in a way that they can consume it on their own time, not at a structured time? The idea of bite-sized chunks of education, which has been around, but how can that be coaching such that I don't need to show up, at 5 o'clock or 9 a.m. when I have to homeschool my kids, right? And I can do it on my own time. And so the idea of non-programmatic coaching, I think is sort of picking up a lot of steam. And that's just essentially taking what everyone else is already doing, but figuring different ways to deliver it. And so that's why, so to go back, the idea of combining the human coach with the technology, take that same human coach, but then can they start to deliver bite-sized chunks to me where it's not about me meeting them for 60 minutes on a Zoom call, but their expertise can still get to me. And so I think that's been a fascinating trend that we've seen.
I think it has too. I think this coaching discussion has actually helped information be pushed down to the individuals that can do the most with it, or that are the most motivated to do something with it. I think coaching is, I think one of you mentioned it before, it's really individual and it's really personal. It gives really direct feedback. I think it was Matti. Direct feedback to that individual. And we can do a lot of that. We can sort of systematize a lot of that through just making sure that we're pushing that information down and then augment with humans when necessary. Other innovations that we want to talk about here? One of the ones that I've seen pop up lately, and I know it's not new, but peer coaching seems to be a bigger discussion in many organizations. And I've actually seen platforms come out to sort of help with peer coaching. Manager coaching, all of these types of things are coming up a little bit more than usual. And I'm wondering if sort of the traditional coaching relationship, you're seeing innovations in the traditional coaching relationship.
Yeah, I think that was one topic that I was going to talk about as kind of innovation in coaching. So I'm glad you brought it up, is that I think there's a spectrum where it's like you have full executive coaches on one end, and the other end of the spectrum, you have the pure technology. And in the middle, there's kind of using technology to identify peers who can help in the coaching experience. And so one of the things that we do at Strive is, we start with a 360 assessment. Every single participant is evaluated on about 20 different leadership competencies. And then once a month, participants can submit problems that they're facing. And then we identify people who are either at their company or across other companies who have been validated by peers as experts in topics. And then those people serve as peer mentors and advisors. So if you have a big sales presentation at a conference, you say, I really want to work on public speaking. We find somebody in our network who's been validated as an expert in public speaking, provide you kind of limited curriculum, and then also a session with that peer. So I think that oftentimes we learn best from our peers rather than from an expert who's charging hundreds of dollars an hour.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we've seen as well, is we're taking advantage of the talent that we have versus always assuming that the person outside the organization knows more.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Go ahead, Neil.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I agree with that. I think the balance we continue to try to strive there is time. And the amount of time that folks are spending on that. How do you almost create like a bank and say you've got 10 hours a quarter or 5 hours a month or whatever to do that coaching? Because what we find is that there is a trade-off in terms of time, particularly now when we think about COVID and the lack of any boundaries of, people will throw lots and lots of time into something like coaching where maybe either they're passionate or they enjoy it. But we need to balance their general productivity to that as well. So that's the balance there, and something that I'm continuing to look for providers like Strive and others to solve for us.
One of the things that we found that's interesting on that point is that actually the opt-in rate for being a coach is like 2 to 3x the opt-in rate of getting coaching. And that it's like, everybody likes to be on a panel.
Yeah,
everybody likes to be a mentor. Everybody likes to give advice. And so there's a lot of people who say, I feel like I have a lot of expertise in public speaking and strategy and negotiations and critical conversations, whatever the skill may be. And they want to put themselves up on that pedestal in their company as a subject area expert. It's actually more often that people don't have the self-awareness to know that a given problem is a problem for them. So I think that problem identification is often the biggest issue. And then it's about, finding the time to meet with someone. Maybe
adding one thought to this. So I think I'm a huge believer in peer learning, and I think it's a great tool. It's super powerful. At the same time, I believe it's also important to keep in mind that there is a differentiation between mentorship and coaching. So when we talk about coaching, we talk about professional business coaching. This is people being trained for several years to really help people to really explore the greatest version of themselves. And I believe this is not in contrast to mentorship. I think we should just be careful that we cannot replace one thing with the other, but basically we're talking two different stories here.
I think to sort of build on Matti's point, it really kind of comes down to what's the outcome you're driving for and what's the need that that employee has. Because you're right, in some cases, when you're talking about, long-term goals that require deep work, accountability, progress, that might be best handled by an executive coach, someone who's professionally trained. Some of the other models we're talking about, somebody's reached a state of burnout or stress. It may be that they're just in crisis and need to have an outlet to be able to sort of share some of those concerns. So in that case, it may not necessarily need the same sort of resource because the needs are just different. So I think that's one of the things that's exciting. At Sounding Board, we have a platform that we have virtual coaching services we deliver. We also allow that platform to be extensible into our customers so that if they decide they want to, activate an internal coach bench or be able to train and have some of their managers on the platform, we've developed the tools that allow them to do that digitally, but the company sort of has now the flexibility to be able to utilize those tools across the different needs. Because I think Will is right, as much as we would love to say that we've democratized coaching, there is a limitation to the cost that you can bring down when you do have a human on the other side. And so I think companies are really starting to look at how do they activate different talent pools and be able to provide that same sort of coaching approach across their organization.
I think let's move the behavior, or excuse me, the conversation on just a little bit. I think we've talked about different types of coaching and some of the innovations of coaching. I'd really love to address sort of the main strengths of a coaching initiative within organizations. We talked about stats really early on. I don't think there's an organization that has put this in place that is like, nah, that was a waste of time or money. But at the same time, I'd love to understand, from your clients or Neil, your experience, what are some of the main strengths of some of those coaching initiatives? And let's start with Joe on this one.
Sure. I think what's interesting about coaching today is its ability to actually expand into a bigger need that I think a lot of our customers are having right now, which is empowerment. And so if you think about what companies are going through right now, right, in the immediate aftermath of COVID, people are under the same roof, right? The traditional 9-to-5 schedule is gone. The explicit norms that you have inside a company aren't there anymore. And so how are companies trying to deal with that? And so, it's interesting if you look back at some of the strategies that companies have started to do. There was a research article about a survey that Gartner did where they interviewed a bunch of HR leaders and found that over 20% of orgs bought some sort of monitoring technology, right? Whether it was software or technology to monitor their people immediately in the aftermath of COVID, so April and May. And so you can see right away that the initial reaction is everyone's not here. We have to monitor what people are doing. And the way that they empowered their people in the immediate aftermath was giving them a premium Zoom account, right? Or giving them a work from home allowance to build up their place. But I think right now, as things are shifting, companies are realizing that, the constant is change, right? Everyone's work schedule is changing. I've got twin first graders who might run right through this hall here soon, and every single employee has a completely dynamic and changing work environment. And so the strategy of containing people, making top-down strategies for a giant org, relying on old explicit norms, right, that have been built up over 100 years, it's hard to do that right now. So the way to do that is to empower each individual to build trust and resilience for me so that I could handle this adaptive work environment, right? I could handle the change with my team. And so how can companies do that? How can they empower their folks? And there's coaching. This tool that was always this one line item in the budget is now all of a sudden the strategy that we're seeing for empowerment, right? And that's where the many forms of coaching come into play. And so the strength of coaching is its ability to empower the individual, which is even more important at this time when we're all in our own homes right now, right? And we need to grow and get stronger just to be effective not to be a better executive, but to be effective in my workspace, I need my company to empower me. And that's the sort of the trend that we're seeing. And that's driving a little bit of the ability to push coaching down, right? Like our individual ICs need coaching because they're alone right now and they need help to be empowered, right? And I think that's a positive force of coaching. And I think that's a good thing.
I like it. Thanks, Joe. Do others have thoughts on this?
I can jump in. One thing I'd share again, and it expands on what Joe shared, which is I think even beyond empowerment, there is a necessity to get at root issues. And again, it goes back to what a few others shared around this deeper work that coaching really is great at and why it's differentiated from some of the other types of coaching we started the call with. And that deep work around how they process feelings, how they process stress. We are in this environment where we are at the max of almost all of those things, and gone are the barriers, or the physical or otherwise, that allowed us to contain those things. And again, at Alto, we've embraced conscious leadership as our leadership framework. I think there's lots that work out there, but one of the things I appreciate about it is feeling all your feelings. That's a commitment you make. And again, many of us came from traditional work environments where that wasn't the case. And while it has a huge amount of value, not everybody has it. And I think, again, coaching delivers that value of beginning that work, even if you haven't subscribed to a model that says, feel all your feelings. You start to do that deep work in a coaching relationship that allows you to do that and ultimately be a better leader and a better professional. And I just think, again, now more than ever, that's important, because otherwise those bad habits, unconscious thinking or unconscious leadership become 10x what they were in the pre-COVID, pre-anti-racism world. They're magnified.
Thank you. Other thoughts on the benefits of coaching? I think I want to jump into a couple of questions that have come in. These are open to whoever wants to take a stab at them. I'm curious to hear thoughts on how a coach with a specialty in a specific area, for example, mine is in creative problem solving, can make use of the advanced delivery technologies that are available to some of the companies represented on the panel. Thanks. Any thoughts on that one?
Okay, I'll jump in from the side of the technologies. I think the interesting thing about a technology like what we're doing at Cultivate, or any sort of technology, is self-awareness. And I think someone had mentioned before, like, a lot of the challenge sometimes is identifying the problem. So I could go to that coach, and that coach could say, so what do you want to work on? And I go, I think I'm pretty good. I don't know maybe what I need to work on, or I don't know what my problem is, or it's unconscious, right? Like, I'm not aware of what I am doing. And so I think what is interesting is if the person who's being coached can use some of these newer technologies to increase their self-awareness and bring that to the coaching session, it makes the coach who's doing the coaching even more effective, right? And I think that's, we've at least seen that from Cultivate, which is why I think the combining of I'm now more self-aware because I'm getting more data on me, and I'm going to take that data and that self-awareness, and then I'm going to go to a coach, and I can actually be more direct, right? Like, I know exactly what I want to work on and give that to coaching. So at least from the technology perspective, that's a positive way to use it.
I like that ability off the individual who's being coached. It's still your responsibility. You're just getting help sort of working through those things. The next question is, are there general broad aspects to look for when looking for online coaching? I'm assuming that, from a buyer's standpoint, what are some of the things that organizations should be looking at?
So maybe jumping in on this one, because that's actually a question we ask a lot of our clients before we started the business. So how do you do it these days? And actually, let me start with how not to do it. Please don't go to Google. Please don't pick the first coach that's right on top. That's the best person in marketing, not necessarily the best coach. So in general, another aspect is recommendation. Platform providers like we at Coach Hub, but also if you're more looking at a, I don't know, smaller scale solution, your personal network is typically a very good starting point. And then you should definitely look at quite a few hard criteria. Definitely look at, does this person have a proper coach training? Does this person have a proper certification, proper work experience? And if all of this is checkmarked, then please get to know this person and see if it's also a personal match. That's pretty much my rule of thumb.
I might add one last point, which is, I think Neil sort of alluded to this earlier, which was he's trying to solve for a bevy of outcomes at, Alto. And so it's really, I think it starts with going back to like, what's the outcome that you want to drive? If it's about providing a means of support or really being able to address mental health, then maybe that's where you start to really look at some of the solutions that are offered more as a benefit. Is it that your employees are lacking a certain set of basic fundamental skills? In that case, you might have to sort of move over to that spectrum of being a bit more intentional and deliberate about the competencies you want them to develop and whether there's curriculum or learning attached to the coaching. But what we find is that for most companies, it always really starts with, who's the target segment? What are the outcomes that you're trying to drive? And then really think about what's the right approach to use for coaching to be able to drive towards those outcomes.
Good.
Yeah, I'd echo all that. Audience, outcome, time, and kind of interaction mode. What is the effectiveness and what mode do you think will be most effective given that audience and outcomes?
I want to sort of riff off this a little bit. One of the questions we originally established as one we wanted to address is, what do you feel the balance between humans and technology is in coaching? And I think that's a really important question. What can and cannot be automated? And I want to kick that to Will first, because I know he's got an opinion on it. And then others, feel free to jump in.
Awesome, great. I think to answer the question, I'll probably start by defining what is coaching, which I think we spent a lot of today talking about. I think that there's like two extremes. There's one end of coaching, which is coaching as therapy, which is really like personal exploration, understanding how you process emotions and feelings, why certain conversations trigger you at work and cause you to respond in a certain way. And then the other end of the spectrum, there's coaching as tutoring, which is there are a variety of skills, leadership competencies that you need to develop. And those are, for new managers, for experienced managers, whatever the case may be. I tend to think that the coaching as therapy is very difficult to automate. That's really about developing a strong interpersonal relationship with somebody who asks you insightful questions and creates a space for you to explore your insecurities, triggers, and to think about ways to overcome them. I think that on the other hand, coaching as tutoring, I think is much more likely to automate, to be automatable and thus to have more of a technology solution. There is a recipe for skill development. If you look at like Kolb adult development cycle, it's about, reflect on how you perform today, absorb new lessons, practice those in a low stakes environment, and apply them in the real world before you reflect again. And so I think there's a role for technology to play in coaching as tutoring, in facilitating that learning experience and kind of doing the work of structuring and providing conscientiousness, aiding conscientiousness of participants to improve their skill development. I also would say maybe there's like a little bit of a false dichotomy that it's either humans or technology. It's obviously humans and technology, and often it's technology introducing you to other humans. So the example I gave earlier of if you can use technology to help people identify problems, either by asking them what their problems are or by using something like what Joe's doing and identifying automatically problems people face, then you use the technology to match them to other people who can help them with those problems. So I think, brief summary is like coaching as therapy, very hard to automate. Coaching as tutoring, I think easier to use technology for. In both instances, you should have some combination of humans and technology.
Others want to jump in there? That was a pretty thorough answer.
Yeah, maybe adding to that, So I think really thinking about coaching in a core, and I'm not talking about therapy that basically in an extreme way would even require a therapist, another coach, and also not about mentorship, but really talking about classic business coaching. I believe technology is super powerful, but coaching is always human, and in its core will always be human. And we can use technology to really facilitate this and to really enable us with using AI-based matching. I think this is really great if you want to provide coaching at scale, leveraging technology, micro-learning, e-learning, and so on to really make sure behavior change happens. But I think on the personal interaction, coaching is one-to-one, and that's the power of coaching. And I believe even in 100 years from now, still in its very core, coaching will be human.
Great. All right, we unfortunately have to cut it off there. I just got a 30-second warning. So I want to thank all of the panelists who have shared some really good information. You can get their information off of the speakers menu in the ASU JSB website. Please go and listen to what they say. They've got some really good things going on. Thank you again for your participation. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you all.
Thanks, Dani, for moderating.
Thank you, Dani.
Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.